not like no one will probably be watching.
My parents will.
Oh yeah.
Yay!
Oh yeah. They're probably watching right now, cheering that I said that.
Let's see. No one's logged on yet. I don't know if you can see
Uh,
how many people are on, but I think I saw when we did the other one, a few people were on. But yeah, it's a and Claire was supposed to come on, but she had to like she just started a new job or her new what do you call it movie she's working on, so she couldn't make it. Cool, but yeah, so I'll introduce everyone, and then I like haven't never done this before, but I prepared like a little blurb just to kind of read. I'll read. Hopefully, it won't sound like I'm reading it, and then we can just go into it. All right. All right. You are listening to Left of the Projector. I am your host, Evan, and we are here to discuss the trilogy Hunger Games by Susan Collins. And obviously, since this is a movie podcast, we'll be talking about the movies, probably, a little bit here and there within the books, talking about some of the differences and how that might have affected the entire series. And uh, joining me today, I have Hungry Rye and Rob. Thank you both for coming back.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, I haven't like I said, I haven't done this before, but I'm gonna kind of give a little recap briefly of the trilogy, and then we'll kind of get into the conversation. I think there's some pretty interesting stuff and some new information we have discovered. Mostly, I think Rye discovered on Susan Collins' sort of past and her interests. I think will play a part into this. So let me give a little synopsis and then we'll jump in. So, Susan Collins' widely popular book series, The Hunger Games, has been hailed as a wonderful work of dystopian fiction, but the reality is it's far closer to present day America than many might even be willing to accept. The contradictions of our system continue to grow. Wealth is transferred to the 1%, while the working class are forced to work for meager, stagnant wages. We send our children to die for war somewhere off, and we are expected to just accept this fact. Susan Collins has stated that she came up with the Hunger Games while watching a TV footage of the Iraq War and decided to kind of apply the idea of the just war theory, which Iraq was not a just war in her mind, but it was to fight against the capital. And on top of that, she layered in the ideas of Greek mythology, which we might mention as we get into this. The first book of the series attempted to bring about a revolution against a tyrannical government, Aldous Snow. We see the material conditions in District 12 are ripe for revolution, and they just needed some sort of spark. And then we bring in the main protagonist of the series, Katniss Everdeen, and the Mockingjay symbol, which is used by President Coin as we meet in the second book and the second film. And we see the growing sense of uprising, and the solution is, of course, to bring about an actual revolution. And we don't really get a sense of this until the kind of the closing moments of the second book and second movie, Catching Fire. The final book and the pair of films depicts the final stages of the revolution against Snow and the installment of President Coin until she isn't. So with that said, we can jump right into these. I know that was kind of very brief, and I know Rob and I have, both Ryan and I have all talked about this offline. So what are your general sense of this trilogy? You can talk about the movies and the films kind of as one, one big blob if you want, or you can, just kind of your impressions of the whole thing before we kind of dissect it.
You want to go first, Rob?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, me? Oh. Do I want to go first?
Yeah, go for it. Send it. Or do you
no, I would never say yes. Yes, please do that. Okay.
I was like, confidence.
No. So this is the second time around I've read these and watched them. I've seen them now 3 times. And the first time I read the book, I was like, yes, this is awesome. This is important. And this time, and I was younger then, and this time around, they fell a little bit more flat. There wasn't, I don't know. There were a lot of differences in the first book with the movie that went that had implications throughout the rest of the movies, and we can get into that. And we had kind of discussed earlier, like the notes I have for the first and second movies are extensive, and then by the time you get to the third, all of the radical edge is kind of washed out of the movies, and you're just in this sort of action movie love story, and it just falls flat. That's, I mean, general impression first off.
I agree. I feel you. I remember when these books and movies got really popular. I was like a sophomore in high school, and I never read the books because it was like after my Twilight hangover. Like that was a big deal. So I was like, oh, I can't invest in something. But I do remember like growing up conservative. My parents were like, this is why big government is bad. You can't trust that authority, you know. And then fast forward, this year is the first year I've ever read all of them, and I rewatched all of the films, and it's interesting to see how you can pull so many different like themes to fit your narrative, because it is almost too apolitical. She does not take any sort of real stance at the very end, and I think that's why those films and like the books fall flat, is because she doesn't really give you any answers or solutions to the issues that are arising in these books and films. And I don't know, it almost felt like fanfic of like revolution, and it kind of gives us insight as to why when you use dystopian revolution as like a trope in media, it can kind of almost be detrimental to the cause. Like it just depicts it as something that's not real and untangible, and then like you're gonna set up a society and not give real answers. So it just like further perpetuates the idea that like revolution is not tangible, in my opinion.
And you end up in the same world. You've just been through all of this death and destruction, and what's the end of the movie? The military leader gets voted president, right? It's the same world, what, slightly better, right? It's capitalism with a human face on it or whatever. It's the same world. Nothing has changed. I wouldn't even add the qualifier fundamentally. Nothing has changed. It's just they don't have the Hunger Games anymore.
Yeah. I go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, this is where like the Suzanne Collins, like, Hunger Games is the new version of Animal Farm. That is my theory, and I stick to it because it does, like, they have a lot of overlapping themes, and it feels like that's what she's doing to paint like a liberation ideology when it has like an authority figure as bad. It's exactly the same thing. It's really interesting to see her parallels between the two. And I don't know if you picked up on that. I showed Evan some articles because I thought I was going crazy. And I was like, no, wait, this is real. This is a real thing. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on
I
that
sent that
in
one to
regards
Rob.
to authority and like how its viewpoint is on like authoritarianism, you know, totalitarianism in the Hunger Games.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally the oh gosh, what was I gonna say? I mean, I think it's a good point before we talk about the movies and some of the details in particular about Suzanne Collins. I think I watched a few interviews with her today, and it said that she had lived abroad. Her father was in the Air Force. She lived in Vietnam and India, and she was asked her favorite, most influential books, and she said A Wrinkle in Time, 1984, and I forget the third one. I guess it doesn't really matter. And then when she said that, and then you mentioned Animal Farm, like, okay, she really liked George Orwell. She grew up in a military family, probably leaning conservative, but not. I mean, maybe. I mean, it could have been liberalish. Couldn't find much about her actual political leanings. But I think you're exactly right. Is so many movies paint a canvas of revolution, and then just they don't actually. There's no actual serious, even discussion of what revolution is or could be. It's just here's a revolution, but we don't know what to do because eventually someone will have to be in authority, and that's bad. And I think it is ironic that the person who becomes president at the end is the military leader. It's like, okay, they're just going to become a military dictatorship. Great.
So one thing I did notice different in the books and the movies is surprisingly the labor strike aspect was much more prominent in the movies. It wasn't very prominent at all, but there was mention of labor, and that wasn't in the books at all. And I wonder why. Now you mention all of this about who the author was as an actual person, and makes a little more sense. But I was surprised to see that was something they added in the movies instead of something they took out, which is what they did with most of the book.
Well, they also added in, is it in the first movie? Yeah, it's in the first movie, but not the first book, is the revolt in District 11 after the death of Rue. That is not in the book, but they slide it into the movie to kind of show the unrest, I guess. So it felt to me just generally like the first, I guess we can just talk about the first book and movie is I enjoyed the book, and I think the movie gives like a good picture of what could come. And like you're like, oh, I read this. I'm like, this is kind of exciting. It's pretty, could see where this could go. And then I feel like it doesn't. I don't know. Did you feel like let down? But I wonder what you guys thought of the first one, just general, I guess.
I mean, I thought it was pretty good. It matched up pretty well with like what happened in the book. I know they couldn't make it too like violent by any means because it's like PG-13. They did seem like they focused. I mean, like her whole thing is like she's focused on the relationship dynamic or like love triangle that is like Katniss and Peeta, and like how they have to like paint themselves a certain way so that they can get money, so that they can survive the games, which is like a whole other like plot point. But they focus more on like like her internal battle with like forming relationships or whatever, because she's like so reclused, which kind of makes sense, like her upbringing. And like how poor it is in like District 12, like they're hit significantly harder than a lot of the other districts. Like how many times was her and Gail, they both had to do like the tesserae where they had to like put their name into the drawings multiple times in order to be able to have like food.
They didn't mention that in the movies for sure.
And I wish they would have, because it would have made more sense why Peeta threw the bread. Because you don't know why, and it's because she's not old enough to be able to sell her name into like the thing.
Yeah, his name was in it like 18 times or more. I don't remember how many. It was like a lot.
And that like plays into a lot of like the politics of the different districts and how like they keep everyone like organized, like social control and whatnot. It's just interesting like to see how District 12 and like their the peacekeepers and whatnot, even they're a lot more lax than like in District 11 or whatever, whoever has Rue, and how they like are way more strict. And then you see them like just executing people in the second movie who just dare to do like the 3-finger salute.
Yeah.
One of the glaring things I noticed was that in the scene where Gale is getting whipped, that the soldiers, the old peacekeepers, say a few things in the book like, oh, I think that's been enough. I think the appropriate punishment has been met out. Like there's some solidarity there with the peacekeepers of District 12 trying to save Gale, and that was gone in the movie, and that was very disappointing to me, because I think that's an important. There's this we're all here in District 12 kind of feeling, and in the movie they just beat him, and then Peeta, and then Peeta and Haymitch come in and save him, and that's and the head peacekeeper is the one that decides, okay, fine, as opposed to being convinced by the other peacekeepers.
Well, what also I feel like that scene is kind of also ruined is in the book he is punished because they were out hunting, whereas in the movie it's because he like is defending someone, and like attacks the peacekeeper. And I think
Yes.
it was a conscious decision, in my opinion, to make Gale seem more violent. And I feel like in the movie, they do actually have a couple good lines early on. I guess kind of like we can loosely sketch the first movie, but Gale, when they're kind of having with Katniss and Gale like off hunting, he does make a couple of comments about, wanting to revolt. I don't remember the exact line he says, but he's clearly sees things so bad that he would be willing to become like a revolutionary figure on it, so I feel like they kind of changed his mentality in the movies versus the books, starting from that early on in the.
Yeah, earlier on in the books, like he's like when he's talking about the Tesserae, he says that it's like a means for the capital to have an advantage as a means like dividing them amongst each other. And then like with him being whipped and whatnot, I think that kind of plays in because they don't really talk about like what the punishment for stuff is and like why the Hob and whatnot is like so dangerous. And it's because like stealing or like doing anything that's like prohibited is punishable by death. Like doing anything outside of what is permissible, like they guarantee you like hunting game out in like the commons or whatever, punishable by death, even though like there's no reason not to. Like they're starving people, but if like the capital doesn't deem it and like they have control over that, like they won't allow that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, they also, I feel like the Hob also isn't really a feature too much in the movie, except like the later on when they burn it down. Also, what's the name of the woman who works? Is it May? No,
Greasy May.
Greasy May. Like
Say.
she has a couple scenes in the book that I find like a cool character. She's like has clearly elderly, has lived there been through this for so long, and they kind of just cut her out. I was a little disappointed they didn't include her. And the other character I think that they completely axed is the mayor and the mayor's daughter. I don't know if you thought that made any difference. I think it did.
That was huge to me, right? Because that's where she got the pin, right? In the movie, Katniss picks it up at the market, and it means nothing, right? Yes, right. She got the pin from Madge, who is the mayor's daughter, and it turns out the pin was actually her mom's, who was someone who died in one of the Hunger Games and was a friend of Katniss's mother, right? That pin.
Yeah, he was in the same or as Haymitch, right? They were all in the 50th.
They were all in the yes, exactly. That pin has history and importance, and it all gets wiped away because they make Madge disappear from the movies. And Madge had more than a few important scenes. There's one where she's the one that brings the morphine when Gale is on the table, and instead they just happen to have some morphine right in the house, right? And I tried to be cognizant of what they needed to cut out because it's a movie and they had to fit it in, and what was cut out that should have been left in. And I think Katniss's relationship with Madge was way too important in the book to just be cut out, particularly because of the pin. And it had repercussions through all three movies. Every time the pin came out, I'm like, that pin means nothing. She picked it up at the market. You know what I mean? So yeah. I had a lot of strong feelings about Madge there.
No, I hear you there. Oh, you're gonna say something, right?
Yeah.
No, I was agreeing. Like it's very strange, and I try to think like why they would want to sanitize that too, because like there had to be some like other reason to pull somebody like that, and like the history from it that wasn't just it's not going to make the time. Like why sanitize that solidarity? Because that's like Katniss's only like female friend too. Yeah. You think about it, she doesn't have any friends. Like she's got Gale and her sister, and that's it. Like she ain't even really friends with Peeta.
Well, what they could have done if they didn't want to have the daughter, the mayor's daughter, in the movie, it could have been that she got the pin at the market, and then they explained to her like where that pin came from, and that's a 30-second scene that could have added so much more context and layers, and it actually makes it it shows that her family had a history with the, in Pan Am as suffering, as opposed to just like her being this
Yes.
sort of like one-off person, suffering alone. It's been like a long,
Yes.
yeah. So
They also didn't
It-
show Haymitch like nosediving off of the stave and like how
No.
much of a drunkard he was. Like they
Yeah.
kind of like talk about it a little bit, and I don't know why, because like he was destroyed from the games.
Yes.
Like his soul was crushed, and like he was just seeking out any vice he could. And like in the films, he's like way too cognitive for somebody who's supposed to be drunk the whole time.
go ahead, Rob.
I feel like they did the same thing with Finnick's character, where in the books Finnick really falls off a cliff, and gets really obsessed with like tying knots and loses his mind, and they have to bring him back to the point where it's and Finnick and Katniss bond over this sort of, their relationship gets really important in the books, and it was kind of there in the movies, but it disappeared, I think.
And it makes it seem like
But-
when he does pass, like it doesn't hit you as hard. It's
Exactly.
not as impactful.
Exactly.
Even though like there's a
Exactly.
lot more there, and they're just like, oh well, he's a goner.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
so the I guess briefly, the first 30 minutes or so of the movie before the actual reaping, I think with some of the like mild exceptions, I think does a pretty good accounting for the book. Obviously, we've talked about some of the missing pieces, and I think I was saying this before we started recording, is especially the second movie, but the first one, is there's a much harder focus on the actual Hunger Games fighting in the movies, because it's action, and that's like kind of what people, as disgusting as it is, it's kind of what you want to see, action. And I think that it kind of does a disservice to some of the character development, especially in the first one, is you don't really get a sense of what Katniss is going through in the movies at all. Maybe in the third one, when she's kind of recovering again and she's just destroyed. But I don't feel like you really get a sense of how broken so many of the people are in these, especially District 12 and 11, and I'm sure others as well.
So this is one of those parts where I had to ask myself, is this because they're trying to fit it into a movie, or is there something else going on here? And it's Katniss's like internal dialogue, and she's always so conflicted. There's a lot of parts where she willingly accepts the need for a revolution in her own internal dialogue, right? And we don't see that, and it like flattens her as a character. And I don't know if that's just like they're doing it because she's a woman, right? Or if they're doing it because they need to fit it all in a movie, or what exactly. Am I frozen?
No,
we're just very
okay. Yeah. No, so and the internal dialogue of Katniss was so important, because it gives you this complex person that is struggling with herself. And instead, you barely see it and I don't know how you would do internal dialogue in a movie format, right? So I have to give them a little leeway there. But it was so important, and to just not express the things that were expressed inside Katniss's mind.
you would have had to do
movie.
voiceover, which
which
could be
wouldn't
good,
work.
could be bad. Yeah,
I but still, it's like all of those important things where she says, yes, revolution. Oh, no, revolution. I can't possibly. Yes, I love Gale. No, I don't love Gale. And it's just kind of, you get a little in her eyes, but you don't get the real dynamism
it
of
almost
a
makes you
human
not
being.
like her. Like I remember watching those, and
Yes.
it's like, she's not a great main character. And like even in the books, like she's going through her conflict, but it makes more sense because you're able to see that like she's still naive because she's a child. She's literally
Child.
16 when she goes in. But then in the movies and whatnot, like you don't like her. So you're not like rooting for her in the same way that you are for like I really like Peeta and Gale. I was like the books and whatnot. I was like Peeta and Gale were pretty like goated for the most part. but I don't know. I don't know if they did that because they couldn't. I mean, if they can make the last book 2 movies, like why couldn't they find a way to add more dialogue between her and more characters so that you could get an idea of what's going on in her head? Because I think it's possible. There was no reason to drag out the second book or the third book into 2 movies, but they couldn't spend time on those really important aspects of like Katniss's character.
Yeah. I mean, I think and this is I don't want to call this a failing of the first book or even the series. It's partly just the way that Collins wrote them is you don't have very much, and this is not an uncommon thing like in dystopian type books that I've read and movies, is we don't really have any context about why they're doing what they're doing. As to, you kind of just get straight to the reaping and they're picking them, and you kind of have it. This is kind of like to remember that that there was this uprising and it almost tore apart the country and blah, blah, blah. But you don't really, I mean, you sort of understand it as they want to just instill fear into the districts. I mean, I don't know where I was going with this. I feel like you don't get a real sense, but they bring in those scenes with Snow. So President Snow, which don't exist in the books because it's all through Katniss's, mind. And I think that at first I didn't like them, but then I thought maybe this actually does kind of give you a peek into how evil and how horrible the Capitol is and how much they're manipulating everything and everyone. I mean, Snow, of course, but.
Yeah, because like even in the movies, I don't think it really talked about like the history of like Panem and like how like it started and there was all the natural disasters and whatnot were happening. So they like established all of these districts and like the capital to be like peacekeepers, and like maintain balance. And then everyone revolted, and then everybody but 13 lost, or they all were defeated except 13. They were like leveled to the ground. So that doesn't really like play into like that power dynamic there. And sometimes like Snow just seems like he's being an asshole. Like there isn't like a bigger picture there.
Yeah.
He's got like a personal vendetta against a 16-year-old, but that's not what was happening at all.
And it's partly part of his. I mean, he has those little conversations with what's the name of the games maker? I'm blanking on his name at the moment.
Plutarch or whatever.
No, and then the first one, the guy with like the funny
Seneca
beard.
Crane.
Seneca Crane, yes. And like they have this constant kind of dialogue where they're kind of how they're planning everything is very, meticulous. But I think you're right, is that he just is evil because he can be. I mean, and the thing you don't kind of you don't really get this sense, I think, from either the book or the movie. Maybe you can both say if I'm wrong about this. Is you don't actually in the book you do is how much the capital relies on all of the resources and labor of all of the different districts. And there's a map, I wanted to send it, but I didn't, where it actually shows like where each district is located, or I guess, I don't know if it's actually from her or if it's just theory. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen that map.
Yeah, but it matches up with like the major industries in the U.S.
It does.
Like, isn't District 12 like the Appalachia area?
It is, yeah.
And then
West
like I would be
Virginia.
District 4. I'd be in like the lumber district.
Right. I mean, but clearly without obviously their labor and all the things they're doing, the capital is completely shut off. And it's strange to me, but at the same time, I guess not that strange, that none of the districts can talk to each other. So there's no coordination. So that was part of what made it so difficult to have any kind of revolution, is because the only connection they have is when the people from their district are going to the Hunger Games. So the capital has done such a good job at preventing any kind of revolutionary spirit through the Hunger Games because they just can't.
one of the things, this is kind of tangential, but one of the things that stuck out to me, and again, I recognize they're just trying to tell a story, and that's okay, but there was no rest of the world anywhere. And it's easy to tell a story how you want to tell the story if there isn't an entire world surrounding you. And would this, would any of this happened if there was the rest of the world? And so it goes to communication. Now I'm making this up, right? Are they just entirely cut off from the rest of the world? Do they have that much control over communication? This is supposedly in the future, they have these hovercrafts and stuff, but like, nobody has a cell phone, all of these things. And I know that at some point it's too much, right? Because they are just trying to tell a story, and you make accommodations to get the story out. But it's hard for me, in my mind, to make it seem real when there aren't, for example, cameras everywhere, and everybody has a cell phone, and like all of these things. Where is it all?
But they have cameras everywhere in the like they have the video of when Katniss kisses Gale, like, so they do have cameras everywhere, but it's sort of like a technology distributed in the way that because I think the Silicon Valley area is like where the technology hub is in that map, and so they've clearly. But I totally understand what you're saying. It's like,
but still, why hasn't China come in and just taken over? If everything's in such disarray, you know what I mean?
Come and liberate Panem.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is the Capitol has like massively amazing technologies. Like in the books, they give Peeta a new leg, which they cut from the movies, which I don't know, probably
also
expensive.
Katniss's ear.
Yes,
she blew out her ear in the book, and they didn't have that in the movie. I don't know how much these things matter. That might be one where it's like, doesn't matter so much.
I guess it's the idea that the Capitol had such technology and wealth. And I think this goes back to what you said right at the very beginning of people can watch these movies and read these books and kind of take from them. Oh, there's a siren. Hold on. Go on past. But you can like take from these movies what you want to, and it could easily be someone who's like super anti-communist, say this movie and like this is socialism, though, because you have the rich people living in the big palace in Capitol, and you have all the poor people doing all the work. But the reality is that's what literally now, which is why I feel like the movie isn't as dystopian in quotation marks, as it seems. Like can it really be dystopian if it's actually so true? Like the what's that, the series, the Margaret Atwood book that's now in a TV show.
The Handmaid's Tale. Like,
is that even dystopian at this point? Like, it's just basically reality. Like these dystopian novels are almost, they've lost, so in some cases they've kind of lost that edge.
I'm telling you, she's just trying to be George Orwell. Especially with the camera thing, it's Big Brother. Like,
yeah. You sent me the thing too, and I mean, it's how President So is equivalent to Squealer. They have lots of propaganda. I'll put the article in the show notes. Anyone wants to look at it, but like, it's pretty.
It's so strange that like they made, I don't know, it's like when they do revolutionary characters and like we saw this kind of like in Joker and stuff and whatnot, where they're not like good, not great leaders or effective. Or I guess she was effective. I don't know, it's just bad. Like it's not a good depiction of like a revolutionary leader, and it makes me mad to watch it, because then we have to I have to like go through all the mental gymnastics like we are now, trying to like make it make sense, like why they would do that, why would they write it like that, and it doesn't make sense to me.
I had a conversation about, because I was talking about the situation where how they cut out Madge, right? And the question put to me was, well, do you think it was intentional on the movie producer's behalf to cut out the things that make it radical. And another example is the four notes, the right? That was something in the movie that her and Rue just kind of made up on the spot, right?
Yeah.
But in the books, it was an important tune that signaled the end of the workday, right? So why do they cut that out, right? And my theory is that these are basically well-intentioned movie producers, but it's a sort of subconscious, what can we cut, what can't we cut? Oh, we can cut that, it's not important. But to someone with media literacy and someone who has a materialist analysis says, no, actually that was the most important, and you've cut it out. And it's a subconscious thing that these movie producers do to save time, to make the story flow better, when in reality they're neutering the whole.
But are they doing that subconsciously, or are they doing it like intentionally so that they can increase the profitability of the franchise? That's what I'm curious about.
Okay, so yes, 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 but it's not ill-intentioned. It's like, oh, if we cut that out, it'll make more money, and that's what we're trying to do here. It's not, oh, we don't want to. If we produce something subversive, it won't make as much money. But if we make it main, I don't know what I'm saying.
It makes me wonder if like the investors are like, no, you can't publish this, because they know like the outcome that it'll have on like the broader public if they post something that is like over the line of what goes against like social norms when it comes to revolution. Like if it actually depicted something of like liberation, like, oh, well, maybe this will give people ideas. Like, I don't know if they do that intentionally or not. I can't find anything about it.
I can't give them that much credit. I don't think they're smart enough to know. I really think it's subconscious choices, sort of making a broader narrative.
Things are now so focus grouped, like before they even are, like even from just I feel like they focus group things even before there's like even a movie. Like they're talking about, they could read parts of the movie. I don't know this exactly to be true, but I know that there are heavy focus groups on movies, and it wouldn't shock me to think that the average person watching these movies as a teen when it came out or whatever, who read the books, maybe they want the structure to follow sort of just the what am I trying to say? What you kind of expect from a big Hollywood movie. Like, people don't want to be going into the movies and being spoon-fed like things that might actually make them think, because then they might actually think, and that's bad. And I think that some people, like people who I'm know and friends with that are more liberal side, they don't want to be told what these movies mean, because to them it ruins the movie. So I think what they're doing intentionally is sanitizing the movie. Whether they're sanitizing it because of like the revolutionary aspect in this movie, maybe not. Mm-hmm. Like, just kind of to get the biggest audience, because that makes the most money. And just as an aside note, these movies cost $500 million and they grossed $3 billion.
Do you know when they came out?
Yeah, like, so 2000, movies? Yeah, so the years 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. Obama era. Not that matters that much, but a little bit. I mean,
it does, though. It does.
It does, if you think about it. Like,
yeah.
Barack Obama being elected as president, even though he's a war criminal, like, it was still really big. It was the first black president. There was a lot of turmoil.
And that's like the whole thing. It's like we get rid of the bad president, and we now have this good president, right? And everything is better, and we can raise our kids in the meadow.
Well, since we've been kind of talking about some of the changes and things that happened, and I think some of the biggest pieces of the movie, I think, because a lot of the bulk of the first movie is the actual, the Hunger Games itself. And obviously we have the lead up, and a lot of the book itself brings talks about the train to get there and the place they're staying, and kind of describing the elaborate nature of the capital and the food and everything. But I think one piece that makes it fit in with that Animal Farm narrative, and just generally within this whole series, is like the propaganda that's being shown on TV, from the interviews with the interviews to the fact that everything about the reaping is televised. And they just have these little like TV projectors like in every home apparently that just like turn on. You can't turn them off, it seems like. So you're forced fed all of this propaganda. And apparently Susan Collins also said she was inspired by reality television, which kind of led to the fact that that's why everything is televised, and you can't escape the kind of the merging of war and reality television, because that's actually probably one of the more unintentional things that I think she said or she did, is that war is used like a reality TV in America as like a propaganda mode to convince you of whatever they want to convince you of, like they do in this movie.
This is sort of off topic, but I remember I'm old, right? I remember when the Iraq War started, and I remember watching it on live TV.
Me too.
And watching Baghdad get bombed, and not like, and it was another TV show, right? And I agree, they definitely gave that sense in these movies that the hair and it looked like an Oscars presentation, right? The whole Hunger Games thing, and it's like this, and then the people eat it up, and it's actually human death happening, and it's a TV show. It's all entertainment for us,
Yeah, and you can see the disconnect because like the people who like helped them get dressed or not are like talking about where they were at and what they were doing in their nice like penthouses when like the children were being like brutalized by each other. Like, oh my god, I was eating this caviar, and then like Gail or not Gail, whatever one's Glimmer died.
But I actually do, when you mentioned like the people who were like part of her crew of getting her ready, like I feel like the Cinna character actually does have, I don't know, I feel like it's better in the book, but I do feel like some of the people who live in the capital do realize, even if it's not entirely why, they see like the problem with what's going on, but they feel like powerless to it. I feel like that's how Cinna was feeling. Like he wanted to try and all the things with the fire and the things he did to prepare her before the games felt mildly, I don't want to call it revolutionary, might be too far, but clearly they felt something in the air. I don't know if you think that's the case.
There was also the prep team. I don't know exactly when it was, but there's the prep team crying a whole bunch for the quarter quell when they're preparing her, and Katniss has to kick him out. Shit. Did I?
You're still here.
Am I there?
You're good.
Yeah. It went curly Q on me. Katniss had to kick him out, and only Cinna could come in, and I definitely like began to feel for these capital characters, and they realize that they're sort of participating in this terrible thing, and you get that sense. And I was really same with Effie in the movie. I really loved Effie by the end of the movie, and Katniss did too, and recognizes these are people that are brainwashed as well, right? And there's an important element of solidarity with class traders that we need to.
Well, they're like petty bourgeoisie, you could say, maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
What do the people in the Capitol do as their job? Is what I also was thinking. They seem to have like shop owners because of the third movie. You have the little like dress shop, but are they just getting the materials like the dresses that are being made in district whatever, and then they get sent there and then they just sell the stuff? So basically, they're just like the mini capitalists in some sense. I don't know. Small business owner.
I made that note in my book about there's no. We do get it in the third movie how Pollux, the camera person, worked in the sewers.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there is no, and you have the Avox slaves, right? Service people, but there's no class within the Capitol. And all I could think was, well, that's not how it wouldn't work like that. People still need to, somebody's got to deliver the food. Somebody has to cook the food, and that doesn't show up in either the books or the movies. And there's no way you can't have this rich area without people serving them directly. And where do those servers live? They don't ship them out to a different district every night,
Yeah.
I think that goes back to our criticism of it being like it wants to be dystopian, but it's only got like a little foot in the water or whatever, a foot in the door with it, where it's just like not far enough. There's too many plot holes in it. And I don't know how much work she had written before this, but it makes it more difficult to consume, and also it makes it less believable because I don't know, some of the stuff she says is interesting, like from her character perspective. Like I think we were talking about like, oh, like what's happening in the rest of the world, and I think at the very end, at least in the book, Plutarch is like collective thinking is usually short-lived. We're fickle and stupid beings with poor memories and a great gift for self-destruction. When Katniss is asking him if like, oh, are you gonna go to war again, he's just like, well, probably, like, oh, we'll probably do this again. And I thought that was such an interesting line, and I don't remember if it made it into the movie or not. Because, like, truly oppressed and marginalized people do remember. Like, I don't know what the point of that was. I don't know.
I don't think that was in the movie, but so just as a quick aside, she wrote another 5-part book series before this called The Underland Chronicles, which was about humans who lived underneath New York City in some subterranean society for like hundreds of years. So really not that similar at all to this.
See, but it's like, it sounds like something that could be like real, but it's not. It's not fantasy enough or like dystopian enough to sell me on it. There'd be plot holes. I can guarantee it.
Yeah,
it's too easy. Every time I've tried to sit down and write a story, the world is too complicated, right? In order to make it happen, you have to ignore the rest of the world. You have to ignore all of the actual complications that exist in society, and focus on this. Okay, it's just the United States. There's just 13 districts, and then you can write a story and kind of make it whatever you want. And so I never write anything because it's too complicated. The world is too complicated, and and I don't know.
Well, to talk a little bit, we don't have to go too deep into it, but the Hunger Games itself in the first movie, which takes up a chunk of the movie, I feel like most of what happened is pretty similar to the book, in terms of like who is dying and kind of they change things, like the rabid digital dogs was different in the movie, which not that big of a deal. But I think that the one thing that I think which started this entire thing was when Rob and I were recording the Blade Runner episode, and we started talking about the Hunger Games, and you both mentioned the fact that Peeta and Katniss do not put the berries in their mouth during the end of the Hunger Games before it kind of ends. And you both were saying you thought that was kind of a big change. And it's interesting just generally how that is what kind of that one moment is basically what set off everything else, right? The fact that
They
they both live.
also,
Go ahead.
in the book, they are back to back, right? And in the movie, they're like
Yes.
looking deeply in each other's eyes and fucking. I'm
The
sorry, I
love
don't know if I
triangle
can
thing they
swear.
had to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And in the movie, they're back to back, and going to eat the berries, and they have to spit them out, right? That moment was so irritating to me because it turned it into a Romeo and Juliet nonsense. Let's die for love. And they play it off like they can't let us die, right? But that's not, she doesn't know that for sure in the book, right? It's like, we're going to kill ourselves. And then they stop them, right?
A little too dark for the general populace.
Yeah. But I really wondered about the back to back, and they had to change it in the movie so that it gave this love story more meat to it. But it irritates me that they softened it.
It's like that's such an important point, and like Coin and all of them are supposed to like use that moment to fuel a revolution, and then use Peta. I think it was originally supposed to be Peta, but they couldn't get Peta. But yeah. Katniss as this figurehead for the revolution, and I'm curious how you feel about them trying to put a teenager as like the leader of a revolution, or like like she's supposed to be the icon of a revolution. The way that like film like the propos or whatever with her and smoke and green screen. What is your opinion on all of that? Like revolutionaries doing that.
I mean, it's fucked up. I mean, and that's like my first instinct is if they have all these expectations of like a 16-year-old child, like they're literally putting so much weight on her. And it's funny, I think in the books, in like the second books, the Catching Fire even the third one, I feel like she's much more conflicted about what she's going to do, like whether she's going to join in it. But I feel like she's more like just like, all right, fine, like I'll go along with your plan. I feel like it's that kind of takes away from it too. But I don't. And again, if they had used the Mockingjay symbol with if they had that backstory, they could have used that in those propaganda films. I don't know.
Another scene that was entirely removed was Katniss runs off into the woods and meets the two runaways that are trying to flee to District 13. And they have the bread with the Mockingjay symbol, right? And that's one of the first moments. This is like before the Quarter Quell or right when they announce it, I'm not sure, where she's like, okay, like these people, I am a symbol to these people. This Mockingjay symbol means something. They're running away to something that I didn't know existed. Maybe it does exist. She goes and talks to Haymitch about it. It's like many pages and important and completely gone from the movie. Also on the symbol, just real quick, is Plutarch kind of rubs his finger in front of the watch, and that wasn't in the movie at all. And that's also important because it puts this idea in her head that maybe she's a part of something, but we don't get any of that in the movie. And she just kind of is presented as this puppet through the whole thing, when in reality she's more aware of the revolution than they show.
Well, that's a good segue to talk about the second movie. So the end of the first book and movie is really, she returns home and, presumably now has money that she can now share with people in the community. And then the second one kind of starts off, you think like or the second Catching Fire kind of gets going and you feel like things are better, but they have to go on this awful tour to, every district. And it's, for her, she's just like a socially awkward 16-year-old and doesn't want to have to like go and do speeches and have to continue this charade with Peta. But when she goes to the Capitol, and I think you're right. The only other time they try and fit the symbol is when they're on the train into the Capitol, spray painted on the side of one of the like
Yeah.
walls, like a graffiti, is the
Yeah.
Mockingjay symbol, and that was like the replacement of the scene you're talking about, and it's a shitty
Right.
replacement.
It's not enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just the second. I think the second movie, they don't. I don't know. I'm now trying to remember if in the second book, did you feel when you were reading the second book, even before the actual quarter quell, like that there was like a revolution bubbling? I mean, we all know what's happening, so it's hard to.
I think you only get a sneak peek because they're doing like a party at the mayor's house when they're all done, and Katniss ends up walking by like the mayor's room, and there's a TV, like he has like a special mayor TV, and he can see this live stream of the revolutions happening, and it's like a very like she should not be there, she should not be seeing that, and like that's really good information, but she doesn't see any of that throughout the films. Like she's just seeing what's happening like firsthand, which is kind of, it's strange that they wouldn't include something like that, because that again could have been like another 30-second inner like thing somewhere. They could,
but by
put it
cutting
in there,
out the mayor, they can't have that scene, right? Like, because that's
They cut out. It's Madge. They cut out the relationship with Madge, and that's that scene. Is that she's like hanging out with Madge or whatever at this party, or looking for Madge or something.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm a Madge stan now. She's the most important character.
Yeah. Well, the thing too, I think that the second movie, when I was reading it, I felt like I might have enjoyed that book the most of the three. And maybe it was the best of the movies. I'm not sure. The first or second one probably are much better than the last two. But also, I think we haven't really talked that much about Snow, and maybe it's not even that much conversation. And especially, I haven't finished the prequel book about him. But they make it a point to have those scenes with Snow in the second movie, especially when he goes to meet her in District 12. Like he's scared. Like he doesn't maybe give away his fear as much as he has it, but he's worried that she is going to do something. And so they obviously changed the quarter quell to have her go back. I mean, there was no other. It was like in some envelope. Like in the book, they make it seem like it's this envelope that's been secretly hidden away.
Yeah.
But how do you know what they're gonna? He could just read whatever the hell he wants to read, and it's like, oh, this is what we're doing. You're all gonna die because he had to kill her.
I really appreciated that uncertainty in the book, where you suspect they're doing this because of the events that have just happened, but you don't know because the card is yellow, and there's the line about whoever thought of the Hunger Games planned for centuries of it, right?
Yeah.
And in the movie, it's they plan it. Period. End of story. And I really appreciated the uncertainty about that in the book.
Yeah. What was I going to mention?
I got two glaring differences in the second movie.
Oh yeah, please.
Was PETA painted the picture of Rue at the final assessment, and in the book, Katniss has to wait like 40 minutes for them to clean it all up, and she doesn't see it. And in the movie, she walks in and sees it, and that inspires her to do the effigy of Seneca Crane. And that really pissed me off because in the book, she is internally inspired. But in the movie, she sees the picture of Rue, and that makes her angry, and it lessens it because it was externally inspired instead of her own, like, coming to that decision on her own as it was in the book, because she doesn't know that he painted the picture of Rue. So there's that. And the other thing was the bread drops in the book is a direct message, planned out message from the districts. The type of bread is the when the amount of bread is another. They're like communicating with the outside districts with the bread drops, and that there was no bread drops in the movie, and that's another one that's like really important to know, that this is a much bigger movement and everybody's involved except of course Katniss and Peeta, but those bread drops were a message, subversive communication gone.
I forgot that they put that in there. I was going to make a note of that. That is really important.
Yeah.
They completely got rid of it.
Well, I feel like these little bits of the symbol, the Mockingjay, the bread, Plutarch with the watch. I don't know what the thought in my head is that it seems like they're putting more of like the reasoning and the why the revolution is happening on like the people who are actually have some power, like Coin, the people in District 13, the Haymitch, Plutarch, all of them are like the ones responsible for doing this. And it's not actually the people. I mean, yes, they are uprising because they're angry, but it's almost like they're being poked by those things to have it go across the finish line. And I think what makes that something that you said right before earlier today is that it makes it kind of be like a bourgeoisie revolution. Is that it's not really the people revolting. It's sort of like the people having their kind of hands held and pulled towards it by these forces of Coin. And I think that kind of just makes the entire revolution just kind of feel like it's flat.
It does. It like plays into that trope, like where I sent you that article. I don't know if you sent it to Rob about like the video games and like how they depict revolution.
Oh, shit, I didn't send it
and
to
it
Rob.
plays into like the broader like how like media's depiction of it and like unitary heroes in revolutionary media, and like Katniss ends up like embodying that character, like when she ends up killing like Coin instead of Snow like she's supposed to. And I think that also like plays into it. They make it like way too individualistic. Like I don't think it's centered around like collective liberation of like their material conditions, because even then like in the epilogue we don't really get an idea of like what happened or like how they restructured their society to be like way more egalitarian. They didn't do that. Like how they're like they almost needed a longer epilogue, or I don't know, they just focus on Katniss and her being an adult, and it was really frustrating.
And like even like the military throughout the movie, I get that they're not showing like they have this force of people, but it's very much like Gale seems to have like the Navy SEALs that he's like fighting with, and like somehow like they're the ones that have done everything. Like at the end of the movie, the big force goes into the Capitol and marches in and kind of takes over, but it's very much it feels more like a military coup than it feels like an actual revolution. And I hadn't thought about it in that way before, but I think it's hard not to look at it that way.
They didn't feel like a vanguard party, and I think they make a point where Coin was never in the games. Like she never participated in one of them. Like none of them there ever actually had like sacrifice in that respect that like all the other districts had to. So they are not like the working class people being directly affected. I don't know how to word it. Like it just doesn't feel right.
All of these little things, and that's what I struggled with, is when I saw these movies, you just kind of walk away with this sort of meh feeling in terms of it being revolutionary, right? And I can't. There's no one thing that you can pinpoint that explains it, but all of these little things that we're talking about, like you said, the bread and the relationship with Madge, and the soldiers kind of helping to lessen Gale's punishment. All of these things isolated, you think, okay, you can explain it away. Oh, they're trying to fit it into a movie. But as a whole, it softens the whole thing, and it takes it away exactly like you said. It turns into this individualistic thing. Snow is what matters. Katniss is what matters. When in the books, you get this much richer experience of of everything that's taking place that gets kind of just muffled in the movie, and it turns into this bourgeois revolution. It turns into this thing that a right winger could watch this movie and say, that's socialism, those in the capital, right? It makes it a thing that can be interpreted in any way you want, where the books are not that. You can't take the books and think whatever you want, because there's too many moments of solidarity between different people, different groups of people, different places of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third book doesn't resolve those conflicts and all the things that happen, but I agree that I think that the movies really like neuter that message even more so, to it being, again, the money grab to have two movies at the end, for the final book, having them being like action movies. I mean, I guess there was a lot of action in it. I also was disappointed in the third movie how little they had the scene that they're like hiding out in the basement of that clothing shop.
Is it Tigris's?
Tigris, which actually in the first chapter of the prequel, Tigris is actually Snow's cousin.
Oh,
interesting.
So she's like in the very first chapter, she's like helping Snow like get ready for like the reaping.
That's another scene they cut out, is the Katniss pops out from the sewer and there's some random capital citizen standing there about to scream, and she shoots her right in the heart. And that's important, right? That's Katniss crossing a line that she doesn't have to cross in the movies, right? That's Katniss like participating in killing someone who's more or less innocent, and they don't. And
it makes her character more complex. But I think you said, Rob, at the beginning, they definitely give off the vibe of like you don't really like her. You're supposed to like Peeta the most in the movie, which that's fair. I mean, I think he does a lot, and I think he has more heart into it. But I don't know. I found some of those scenes at the end too, just like also when she gets to the Capitol too, and like a child recognizes her. I don't think that happens was that their way of like putting that piece in? Like the child like sees her walking towards it and she has to hide. I think this is when Gale gets captured.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we can't have you shooting. Like we can have you shooting children inside of the Hunger Games, but shooting an innocent child here to save the revolution, thumbs down.
What is okay? I know it's a controversial in like the Hunger Games like fandom community. Do you blame Gale for the bombs? I feel like he gets too much hate. He like went out of his way and he did it directly, even though it was just like him and Beatty's plan that they just like came up with.
I think the movies make it less and make it more. They pushed the narrative of him being at fault, whereas in the books it's much more ambiguous. Like it's almost like Coyne was having this conversation with Beatty about like, oh, these are some strategies we could use. But like there's a scene when they go to after the hospital where Gale and Katniss are talking, and I feel like he's saying like he comes to the point of like, we could. Is it worth risking like children's lives? If what is the exact scene? There's some scene with Gale and Katniss where Gale basically says, if it comes down to like children dying over the revolution or our revolution, like it's okay.
He's like the ends justify the means.
But they don't really give that vibe of him in the books at all. I feel like he's just he's a person who has conviction, whereas I think in the movie they make it be like, like the end justifies the means completely.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were going to say is like the Peeta versus like Team Peeta versus Team Gale.
Oh no! Everyone makes the joke that like Gale. They almost make it seem like he killed Prim with his own hands. But I think it was just happened to be like the wrong place, wrong time, and she took that on her own autonomy to like to go out and help on the front lines.
I assumed that Coyne did it on purpose.
Yeah, I hadn't. It was all Coyne in my mind, both the movie and the book. I didn't,
especially given what you find out about her.
They did cut out how, and this is again, this might be because it's hard to do internal dialogue in a movie, but in the book, Katniss realizes that the only way they would send Prim out is if coin operated, is if coin authorized sending her out. So, and in the movie, it really appears that like it's just they needed medics and the medics are there. But in the book, Katniss is like, wait a minute, Prim is only 14 years old. There's no way they would have sent her out unless coin authorized it.
Yeah, this is another change from the book and the movie that I didn't like. They made Katniss like sneaks out to go to the Capitol to like assassinate Snow in the movie, and that really changes. Like, I feel like they really changed her character. And again, as we've been saying over and over, is that how do you do it with her like internal dialogue? But that's again playing on like the individual aspect of a revolution, is that Katniss can somehow on her own go to the Capitol, somehow navigate all these like crazy booby traps they have across the city, and to get to Coin's palace and then somehow kill him. Like, that's not realistic. And then Gale just happens to be there when she arrives too.
And furthermore, in the book, they have to go through like a month-long training session. They're like, no way, there's no way we're sending you to the Capitol. You're not a soldier. And they go through this whole training process, her and Joanna like has to bow out because I don't remember, she like loses her mind.
Like she,
exactly.
Because she got waterboarded at the Capitol.
Exactly. Right. And no, in the movie, she like, in a real individualistic way, just sneaks onto a plane in the middle of wartime preparations, sneaks onto a war cargo plane and just strolls out into the Capitol.
That's another thing too, is they didn't make Katniss appear like a soldier as part of like the revolutionary movement. In the book, it was clear, like you said, she goes through training, but in the movie, she's just kind of like this lone wolf that's simply like the propaganda apparatus for them.
You also mentioned in your notes, Evan, about the arm tattoos.
Yes.
And the very controlled nature of District 13. And I hadn't really put that together until you had mentioned that, and I was like, that's very interesting. The cruelty. I think
that again plays on like that individual, like collective action. Like, this is our goal. This is what we have to do as part of the unit. Whereas they don't really show that many scenes. The only scenes they show inside of District 13 where like everyone is there is like when Coin is giving these speeches, which I also felt like made her, was like that little nod to her being sort of like this, like she wanted the same thing that Snow had. Like, she's giving these big speeches, kind of like dropping a little hint that she's like kind of power hungry. And also, why did they call her President Coin beforehand? Do they call her President Coin in the book?
I think so.
When was she elected by who?
I don't know. The politics of like District 13 are weird. Like, they're so like prohibition and like such rigorous schedules, and I don't know. They do a really weird job of depicting like communal living.
Very strict dietary. You get just the right amount of calories in the book.
This feels very much to me, District 13's way is, if you look at Susan Collins as being like pro Orwell and like super anti-authoritarian in quotes, that she would see this as like bad, almost like the idea of this regimented system in District 13 is like, ooh, these icky authoritarians have to make you eat only like,
and the jumpsuits, like how they have to all wear the same kind of clothes, and like it gives off very much like anti-Soviet propaganda in a film. Like,
it's almost like they're the ones that are committing the revolution, but they're actually bad at the end because they just want power hungry. They're power hungry, just like Snow. Which again, she's almost. I don't know what to like make of that in her like mind. Like it doesn't make sense to have that be the like. Is that the only conception of like revolution that she can have? Is I guess if you perceive every socialist communist project as like authoritarian, totalitarian.
Yeah, when you're that deeply seated in like Red Scare propaganda, like McCarthyism, and you're told that like these uprisings were like uber authoritarian and like oppressive, and they had all these restrictions and they couldn't go do this at this time. They had to work between these hours. Like they had all their grain eaten, you know, like,
Yeah. I was gonna say Coin ate all the grain with like a big spoon.
like stuff like that. Like they almost made it seem like a gulag.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's a weird. It's just so strange. Like I still think about it. Like this whole time we've been talking about it, just her not taking a true like political stance, and it just sounds like she like has this very naive idea of like what revolution or liberation and like communism like in practical application are, and then she just decided to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, her interview. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, this is any movie that is supposedly subversive. You get this sort of, you get this because you can't imagine beyond the moment of eruption, right? So you get to the end of the second movie, the end of the second book, they have the situation has erupted, and the only thing that the vast majority of writers today, they can get to that point because we can envision that. We can envision the eruption, right? But what comes after that, we don't know. Oh my God, it would be so scary to do something new. All they can give us ever is a better president, a Barack Obama, right? That's all they can ever give to us, because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative they show us is just District 13, is arm tattoos and dietary restrictions.
And the continuation of the Hunger Games. Like she was going to
and the continuation of the Hunger Games, right? But better, right? It's better this time.
It has rainbows on the side of the
on the wings of the bomber, exactly.
It almost reminds me, and I don't like this book, but Mark Fisher's Capitalism Realism, or like you can imagine. I hate it, but it does, like how they say it's harder to like imagine a life outside of capitalism, or like you can imagine the end of the world better. And she seems to fall into the category like where she would extract something useful out of that book. And maybe she should have read it before writing all of this.
I remember the big, like, I remember there was, I don't know, maybe like a year ago, there was a bunch of like dialogue around that book. And like, I feel like I started reading it being like, okay, this seems okay. And then it just like slowly lost me. The only thing that I would, well, we don't need to go off on a tangent in that book, but I think you're right. I think that she doesn't, gosh, I don't know what I was going to say now. Oh, I know what I was going to say, Rob. You were saying like the writers don't know like how to continue that story. And it's, but why do you, is it that they're like, they fear what it is, or they can't, they've seen what's happened in the past, like let's say the USSR, and they say like, we don't want to do that thing. It's better to just hang around in this thing because it's safer.
I mean, to be blunt about it, it's because they're not Marxists.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's the end of history. We're already at the end of history. All we can do is make it a little better. Right. And the Marxist analysis is no, history is never ending. History continues to move. And so a person, even your most bleeding heart, well-meaning liberal, cannot envision a different way to organize society, right? And I noticed in the movies, for example, there seems to be a noticeable lack of like electricity, and in the books they don't mine coal anymore. They're farming their own food now, right? And it's like, well, what, you don't need coal anymore, right? The coal miners aren't going to continue to mine coal, right? That's the real revolution, is the workers seizing the means of production, not like reverting to some sort of like hippie agrarianism. Everybody's farming their own food now, and I know
They
I guess
literally
nobody
went like
gets.
Anne Prim.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody gets coal, right? And what happened to the nuclear power plant? You know, where's that? Like all of that. Those are the things that, because the revolution was so individualistic, because it was so militaristic, there's no, when in reality the revolution has to include the means of production, it has to include how we provide for ourselves. And instead we all, now that, you know, what world do we live in now at the end of the fourth movie? It's the same world, but it's like, sounds like a little more work. I don't know.
I mean, you still have all of these. The society is structured so every district has their like specialty. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. It's that instead of sending all of this stuff to the capital, like you make an iPad and like you send it to the capital so like they can use it at the Hunger Games. Instead, like you're making these technologies for all the people. Like there's no. Did they mention money really in? I mean, I guess they. Do they mention money much in the books at all?
Did they abolish commodity form? Hold
I
on.
don't.
Wait.
Right? I was. This just like blew my mind because they have like credits for grain and oil that they get from winning the Hunger Games,
Maybe
and they give
credits
off
is their currency? Like they
You're
have
what?
to have something because they go to the Hob, but they trade.
Yeah,
They
they don't. They
trade.
give like a duck, and she gives them like soup.
How did
Holy
I not realize that there's no money?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh my god.
Well, that actually adds another layer to like the capital structure too. Like what's going on in the capital, right? Because we don't know what they're doing. If they're not getting paid, like I don't know. I just Googled this and like it doesn't come up with like any.
I don't
Oh
know
my
how
god!
they have luxury. Is it like fully automated gay space communism in the capital? Like, is that the pretext that they're operating under? But it's really just like a product of imperialism of the other districts. Like,
Oh, I don't know, but I just Googled something and I found the most ridiculous article. It's in Forbes. It says 5 economic lessons of the Hunger Games. Number 1, markets are more efficient than command economies.
is that the ECP?
Right. Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Well, they're saying that it's like built on this high-tech society, and they're saying, I'm like kind of like quickly skimming it. It says globalism only works if you ditch the extraction model, and economic equality is bad for business. Man, this is trash.
That's
War
what it
drains
is.
economic. I mean, it's Forbes. I shouldn't be. I'm
I was
just
like,
like
isn't
scanning
like
through this.
anti-globalism stuff usually like alt-right adjacent?
Yeah. The paywall messages came up. I can't read it anymore. I was like, it hasn't come up yet. But yeah, I don't know. The money thing kind of.
There's too many plot holes in these damn films, books
Why?
that have consumed my life.
What would like the? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Really, the fact that there's no money. I was trying to think of any other thing. Oh, so one other thing that we didn't. I know we've like maybe gone to like sort of discussing it, but one thing that they leave out of the movie that showed like the cruelty of coin was they don't have like the imprisoned prep team in District 13, which was pretty explicitly kind of giving off the vibes that coin is actually evil. And they just kind of like skip that to kind of like save that little nugget for later. And also Effie lives in the book, in the movie for a while. She lives in the book, but they don't find her till the very end. Right, I think.
Yeah, they say there's instead of the prep team, it's all Effie.
Right.
And in the book, there's this moment they meet, and she's like, "I haven't seen you since the Quarter Quell." And but in the movie, it's all her. Yeah.
Yeah. And
They make
only
these.
oh, go ahead.
They make these decisions, right, to cut out that brutality of imprisoning the prep team, and the consequence of those decisions like ripples and now it's all Effie, right? And we fall in love with Effie. I totally fell in love with Effie. You know what I mean?
Also, the individual kind of
Exactly.
yeah. They also don't really show either. I feel like there's a case to be made that like Katniss's mental health is completely destroyed, especially like in the last two movies. Like she can't sleep really at all. Like they try and show a little bit in the movies. There's like a scene, I think she has a dream of like PETA coming in and lying, sleeping with her in the bed to comfort her. But they don't really, there's no, and I think what helps with that is it shows like the mental toll that this kind of like a revolution would probably have on someone. Like I can't imagine, like what people would go through. You think of like the Russian Revolution or China or whatever. Just this isn't. You don't really get. I guess that comes back to being like this very bourgeoisie revolution. Is there's no real like consequences. I don't know. I want to know what Coin's deal is. That's the thing that really pisses me off. I want to know where she came from.
She's like an enigma. Like she isn't anything. She's like important, but at the same time, nothing. I don't know. Like she's supposed to be like the embodiment of political power in District 13 and like the brains and power behind the revolution as a whole.
Yeah. She doesn't match up with any of the like Animal Farm comparisons. They're like you have like Napoleon and those things, but she doesn't really fit in. She's kind of like the empty vessel for just the emptiness of like the idea of the revolution. They just need someone. Like she's just a body, a person that's fits in she's like I don't know, maybe the fact that it was during the Obama administration, she's like the hope and change for Pan Am.
I guess.
I don't know. Then this I'm trying to like think of something for her. I just can't. I got nothing to kind of really.
It's interesting. Like all this being said, everything that they have decided to take out, sanitize with these films, it all for the sake of like getting as much money as physically possible for these films. It's like they didn't read the source material of what the films were about, which was about a capital extracting, like being able to make money and like keep political power over other districts. Like, like they missed the point, I feel like, by trying to make these like way too profitable and taking away the messaging. And I think it kind of leaks into, I've seen people say like, oh, I wish they would like do more movies on like the past Hunger Games so we could watch them fight. And like, that's what the films were about though, is like why it's bad. Why would you want to like participate in watching like people fight?
Well, for some reason this just reminded me. I watched a video of someone kind of going through, it was this like feminist YouTube channel, and she was talking about like Katniss, and one of the things she mentioned was when some of the characters from like the careers from District 1 and 2 die, she said that when she was in the theater, like people were like cheering for like the death of a child in a movie where like you shouldn't be like, I feel like they didn't do a good enough job of making you, they made you dislike some of the children in the Hunger Games enough where you're glad that they died. Like it has a very
yeah, because all those kids in like District 1 and 2, like the careers, they were all socialized to believe that they like needed to bring home victory.
I mean, they were brainwashed.
Yeah, like they can't help it. But
at District 1, this is again from the prequel book. This is all from like the very beginning. I guess like she clearly wanted to like quickly bring in, but District 1 was like the other collaborators. Was it District 1 or 2? The one where they had like the standoff like in the mountain. Is that District 2?
That's 2. Yeah.
District 2, like they were like the big collaborators with like the capital. Like that was where like the military prowess came from. And so they actually let some of those people live in the capital, which was unheard of. Like people born in the districts were not allowed to live in the capital. Like that was like explicitly not okay. Like you're not purebred. I don't know.
It's almost like ethno states. Like that's like a
Yeah.
fascist idea of like what an ethno state would be, but like based on like your like labor that you're conducting.
That
I
they
think
even
in the films, don't they show like Ruse District and like they're primarily like people of color, like
Yes.
Yeah.
and it's like cotton when they're like driving in. It's like, oh my god, and I don't remember that in the books at all.
they're agricultural workers. That district.
And they're the ones that
And
get brutalized.
Yeah, the most. And also, they mentioned that like cat, you can always tell someone from District 12 by their eyes. Like, there's a certain look in their eyes. It's interesting you mentioned the ethno state. There's definitely like hints of that throughout. Now that you mention it,
Yeah, but that's not the vibe in the. That's not really in the book. Like they definitely bring that out. I mean, that's like the idea of
Yeah.
sort of. Again, like I'm trying to think, like, are these intentional decisions to make it seem that way, or is it more just this is like they can't imagine another way of it being?
that's the thing. It's too. I have to think that it's all the overarching result of a series of subconscious decisions, and that the final result is this thing that us three look at and be like, this is weird and flat and there's something missing, but you can't ever quite point directly to it. I'm excited. They're about to like blow some shit up or whatever, but like, I don't know why this is falling flat. And I think it's because of these subconscious decisions that a large group of movie producers made that, but without intentionally trying to soften everything. They think they're making this big radical thing, but they don't realize what's going on in
They
the back of their
probably have
minds.
their own like biases. I can't imagine like these big Hollywood producers and directors are of like working class roots.
Right.
Like they're not going to know the plight of like our struggles. So of course they're going to be like, well, that's not important. I'm just going to focus on some more close-ups of people in their clothes at the Capitol or something.
Right.
Like,
Right.
Also, Katniss wasn't white in the books. They described her as having olive skin and something else. I feel like they describe her as, I mean, I don't know.
they whitewash her.
Apparently the casting call when they did it was only for white women with black hair. When they were doing the casting call for Katniss Everdeen. Which, I mean, given Hollywood's track record, I mean, it shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But I know what I want to mention is so Suzanne Collins wrote the screenplay with someone else for the first movie, but had no part of the screenplays for the other three movies. So I think that is important because I think the first movie is closest aligned with the book. And then it was just like, we're going to make the movie that is the coolest, makes the most money, has action. We don't like, we'll have the revolution be there, but it's not our driving force in these movies. I think that's just what it must come down to is this is not their driving force. It's the undertone, like there is a revolution, but it's just like a plot device, just like their MacGuffin to have Katniss running around like in a black spandex or, suit and have like Peeta and her like being Gale and I don't know.
I can't believe she let him cut out Madge if she was part of the first movie. I can't believe it.
I look for interviews where she like talked about any of like her creation of the movie and there wasn't much. All her interviews were like very stock interviews. Everything was kind of like the same answer to the same questions. It felt very much like she also like not like giving interviews. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that shit. It sounds terrible. Like going on like a press tour for like a book seems miserable. I don't know.
They did a scene, one of the scenes where they show one of the districts revolting, and the Capitol brings out water cannons, and which today we don't. I remember at the time, 2016, is that 2016 or so when these movies came out?
A little before that, yeah.
Okay, so then never mind. That's a bad point. Basically, I don't think they would be so kind as to use water cannons in this situation, and it kind of was like, I'm not buying it. Why don't they just shoot people? A couple bullets and everybody'd be running. Why are they using water cannons? That's some other.
Kill people for less.
Right, exactly.
There was the one scene when they're doing their little tour before the quarter quell in the second movie, and it's much better in the book. It's like the scene where they have to like rush them out because like one of the people like speaks up and he puts his 3 fingers up.
Yeah.
And they just start shooting people, and they shoot like an old man in the front of the room. And so, yeah, they had to kill enough that it would instill the fear, because if they killed everyone, then they don't get their little toys and their foods and their little wigs. And yeah, I don't know. Also, one thing that we didn't mention, and I don't know if it's worth discussing, is they clearly, it seems like the message within the Capitol is like, you can only have sort of differing ideas of like gender dynamics if you're rich, and you can have like these fancy garbs. Like it was a much more like fluidity in terms of gender in like the Capitol, but that couldn't be. I mean, they don't really show that much in the other districts, like the coal mining districts, or or the others. I don't know if that's worth just a note.
There were a few times in the book where they mention population, and they talk about the smallpox epidemic in 13 and how it really messed up their genetic pool, and so they were really grateful for all the refugees because they were going to have more genetics, or there were no children, right? And they mentioned it briefly at Finnick's wedding in the movie, how she's like, oh, there's no children here, and she's like, oh, the smallpox messed them up. But they do mention needing breeding stock, as it were. And then also that comes into play in Coin talking about starting a new Hunger Games. We want to kill a bunch of people, but we can't because we need their genes. We need more people to breed. So maybe let's do this Hunger Games thing instead.
Well, they seem to say at some point that like District 12 only had something like 100,000 people or 80,000 people. That's not a lot of people given
10,000 people.
That's how many are left right after they bomb it or something?
No, 981 or something are left out of 10,000.
Oh, so there were only 10,000. I guess there can't be that many people if they're fencing them in.
It's one of the smaller districts, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the agricultural district had a lot more people, and they were treated a lot more brutally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We didn't really. I don't think there's that much in the third and fourth movies as far as like the action. We talked about some of the things that they changed to it. And I think we've covered a lot of the revolutionary aspect. Is there anything other than Madge? Anything else you got, Rob, that you thoughts on, whether they're like things you just noticed or closing?
Yeah, I mean, I got 6 pages here of random differences, right? What, and it's in this. I have this like music notebook, so it's all, you can't see it, but it's like it's on like guitar tab paper. But yeah, one is when the Capitol attacks District 13 with the bombs. There's a scene when they're all going down the stairs, and in the movie there's almost a stampede, and in the book they make it very clear that these people are organized, planned, they prepared for this, everybody's calm. But in the movie there's like a sort of stampede,
individual, right? Collective action right there.
Yes.
Once again.
Yes. And on the same note, there's a very poignant line in the book about how when the Capitol people turn into their own sort of refugees, everybody's locking their doors, nobody's letting them in, and they didn't show that in the movie at all. Like the Capitol people were very individualistic, not helping their own neighbors, right?
It's funny. The Capitol is enormous with all these buildings whenever they show it from above. But at the end, when everyone is sort of like fleeing to the Capitol, like there aren't that many people. It's this. I wondered when we were talking about who is doing like the labor in the Capitol. I wonder if some of those like giant skyscrapers are just like AVOXs and, people that are just there doing. They live in the Capitol, but like they're in lock and key in some like Soviet style, building that looks like the building next to it, and they have to eat like rice paste or something. I don't know. I don't know what rice paste is, but
also the very last like scene in the book, like Gale punches somebody, steals the gun, then they get 2 guns, and then Gale and Katniss both have a gun. And in the movie, Gale is the only one with a gun, like leading the charge, and that pissed me off. Instead of them both having a gun. Hold on, let me see real quick.
Also, the fact that like Plutarch, like the act, like Philip Seymour Hoffman dying, and so they don't have him in the last like bits of the movie. Was disappointing because they had that like little letter at the very end that he writes Katniss, which obviously they couldn't film it. But that's, I mean, it's sad because he's such a good actor, and they missed his little bits.
When Boggs is dying. In the book, he says explicitly, kill PETA, period. In the movie, he says, kill PETA if you have to. That bothered me. I thought that was important because, again, it shows Katniss's internal struggle. She doesn't know what's good, what's bad, what she should do.
I think the whole thing of like, even in the books and the movies, like parading PETA around like through the Capitol is just so... I think that was part of in the third book when I'm reading it, where I'm like, I just don't really like this as much. I don't know. I don't know what it is about that it kind of shows their cruelty, but it was in the movie, they were trying to show him like reaching, like becoming a human again, almost like they had to do that for like love triangle. Like he's falling back in love with Katniss, but like they're falling in love for real this time.
Yeah. It's like, they don't really, I don't think they can do justice to like what they actually did to PETA and like how like fucked he was from like all of his like brainwashing, and like the reason that Coin sent him and all was to kill Katniss, because at that point in time, like, she's over it, she's willing to pull out all of the stops.
I think Rye really hit it on the head with this is anti-authoritarian propaganda. Right. And that anyone can walk away, no matter where you stand politically, you can walk away from this movie hating the people you hate more than you did before you watched the movie. And I don't think that's true with the books. And just like you said, in this, you could say, okay, those are the Soviets. Authoritarianism is bad. And I watch the movie and I say, oh, that's the fucking bourgeoisie. Fuck them, I hate them, you know. But there's no clear, again, like Rye said, there's no clear political stance taken in these movies.
Yeah, typical Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are better revolutionary type movies like this. I mean, I feel like I've done some of these recent movies of like Triangles of Sadness, and these movies that have these anti-capitalist views that actually have a bit more to say. But being that the source material of what they had to go on, better than the movies, but still like you still had an author who's writing this as kind of an anti-authoritarian, anti-left kind of perspective. I mean, that's the kind of movie that Hollywood wants to make. They want to tell you that socialism bad, capitalism good, trying to change things, that's too messy, so we should just stick around to this.
It almost seems like they're trying to pull like the centrist viewpoint of like, oh, these extremists, like horseshoe theory.
Yes.
They're both
Yes.
bad. They're both equally bad.
Yes. I think actually that's what my partner was saying, that when we were watching one of them, or maybe it was the end, was saying like they're kind of putting you in the middle of saying both are bad, so we
Yes.
shouldn't do either. We should just kind of like do a Norway, do a Nordic, you know,
Do it Norway.
like do a little just a mild exploitation of the global south, not as much
Right.
as we got here, but
Liberal democracy is the way. We just need to do it a little better this time around.
yeah, you can have Hunger Games, but sponsored by like a responsible brand. Like they could have the little things that drop in to give them could have like little messages to say, I don't know.
If there was one book, or not even a book, it's just like a piece of work, of leftist Marxist work, that I wish anybody who was listening to this, who maybe is on the fence on like authoritarianism, please read On Authority by Frederick Engels. I'm begging you, because I think it'll make a lot more sense why we are saying some of the stuff that we're saying in this. Because it's not that authority, it's an unjust authority, right?
Yes.
We got to combat horseshoe theory whenever we can. Please apply yourself and read after this.
And you can go to Marxist.org. It's literally like a 10 to 15 minute read. Like it's not very long. It's a quick read. Actually, I actually mentioned this to someone at some like video on TikTok, and they said like, "Oh, I read it, but like it didn't make any sense because it's still authoritarian." I'm like, "Oh my god, did you read it, or are you just telling me you read it? Because I don't believe you. I don't believe you read this." What is it like his line of that I always say is, there's nothing more authoritarian than revolution. That's you think you can just like go in there
revolution.
And like wag your finger at the Capitol and be like, give us some stuff, and like they're just gonna
please.
Yeah, if you say please sir, can I have some more?
I'll go drop off my ballot now. Sorry.
But I don't know. Any final thoughts? I feel like we've covered the shit out of these movies.
Yeah.
There's I think anyone out there who hasn't seen these movies by now, which I actually hadn't seen the last two until preparing for this, you could just like save yourself like 10 hours, and well, I guess it's longer to read the books, but you could read the books instead.
Well, yeah, we're definitely not elitist when we're suggesting that. Like, it's just you're going to get an overall better experience.
And it's not one of those like, oh, the book is always better than the movie kind of like piece to it. I feel like it just, in this case, it really is a different message. It's not just
it's
like
a different. Yes. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think if I had one thing to say, I'd say like the books give you a message that's better, not great, but better. But if you like action movies with, I don't know, love triangles, then these movies are for you. If you like to, if you like Woody Harrelson with blonde hair. Someone was saying that they thought that he was bad in the role. I thought he was good.
I think he nailed it.
Yeah.
Again, like Rye said, they didn't show how fucked up he was as a person, really.
No. Like, isn't there like, there's the scene where he like pisses himself and Pete has to like put him in the bath, like the shower. Yeah. Like how could you not be? Yeah. You literally spent you killed a bunch of children as a child and have to like live with that for the rest of your life.
Especially his, because there was like double.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like twice the amount of children. It's terrible.
And they really, again, also with Finnick gets really messed up. And also Annie was, I don't know, Annie must have been in one of the games.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But like
we kind of skipped over most of like other than a few of the characters in this movie. We kind of focused on, I think, more of the crux of the plot, of the the message
Yeah.
and everything. So there are other interesting characters. I think Finnick's character's all right. I think they had some good aspects to it, but I don't think I got anything else. Rob?
You're good.
Yeah, I think
That's a wrap.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No Madge. Bring back Madge. That's all. I'm serious.
Madge fan fiction.
I really like, and it's interesting because she's sort of upper lower class, right? She's the mayor's daughter, right? But such a vital.
What happened to
component.
her in the book? Did they ever say?
She died, I think, when the strike, like the bombs hit.
Oh, presumably
she got
because her
out.
dad probably had to be there.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I've actually wondered since they made this. She wrote the prequel a few years later. I wonder if she will go back to the well and make like something that happens afterwards. Because I'm sure that the studios would love to see Jennifer Lawrence back and like as an older person. I don't know, but they made it seem so idyllic at the end. I don't think you could really do it.
God, did I hate the ending? Sitting there with the baby and the kid playing in the field with dad, and it's like the world is not okay. The world is not like beautiful now. I just
Individual.
hate the ending. It's
so
so
escapism.
It's so escapism, and like where are you getting your coal now? I'm serious.
They got hydroelectricity now.
Right. Where's Madge? Where's the coal?
These are going to be on Rob's new merchandise of toothbrushes line. Where's Madge? Where's the coal? Limited edition.
And where do you got time to like play with your kid in the meadow? Aren't you growing your own food now out in that meadow? Oh, also, I'm sorry. I got to say this. The meadow in the book is a mass grave, and they got rid of that. They buried all the people in the meadow, and that would have been a lot more meaningful to see the baby and PETA playing on a mass grave
with like the bones.
Right. Well, I mean, they're buried.
Sorry,
they're not like on the ground.
Yeah.
On the surface.
Well, that they also show that when they go back to the District 12, when she goes back after the destruction, they don't make it very explicit they make it explicit like in the movie that she's like walking over bodies.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that being...
She sees the one skull, and they do the one pan, when they pan over and there's like bones everywhere.
Right, that's true.
But she definitely like gets like gore, and she like moves some things and gets like blood and guts on her hands.
Where's Hamish going to get all the alcohol? Like once they move back to District 12 too, like there's no hob.
There is a distinct lack of acknowledging production in these movies and how production works and where it all comes from and who's in control of production.
It feels very inefficient. It's like the old thing of like capitalism where like something gets made in like India and it gets shipped to South America to do something else, and then it gets shipped back to Europe, like to be sold. It's like this. I don't know.
Right, like canned peaches goes to like crosses like 4 different oceans to end up at the grocery store down the road.
Yeah. But
no.
Anyway, I think we've done the Hunger Games. We've survived the Hunger Games. But I need to throw, and the other thing too is I love how in all of them they have like the little anthem that's always played. Like it reminds me of like when I was a kid and I had to do like the Pledge of Allegiance in school. Like they all like know the anthem, like super propaganda. All these kids. But Rob and Rye, thank you both for spending this time preparing. We all read books and movies, and to bring you the Hunger Games. It's not a trilogy because there's 4 movies, so fuck you, Hollywood. You couldn't even make a trilogy. Like, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. It's a quadrilogy, a quattro. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
But I don't know why that's just
So, you know,
bothering
it's
me.
the very end. So when the giggles come out.
Yes. But you have been listening to Left of the Projector, and we'll catch you next time.